Good evening. I would like to invite April Henderson, EOPS Supervisor, to lead us in the singing of the national anthem. Gentlemen, please remove your caps. The song's lyrics can be found on page 26 of your program.
Graduates, please stand. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early lights what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you.
Thank you. Please be seated. And I want to give a special shout out and acknowledgement to our own April for singing this anthem, and to her son, Miles Henderson, who is graduating today. Welcome to Foothill College. As interim president, it is my honor to welcome you to the 56th annual Foothill College commencement ceremony. Thank you. I would now like to introduce our platform guests. Please welcome the Foothill De Anza Community College District Board of Trustees. Board President Joan Barham, Vice President Laura Casas, Trustee Betsy Bechtel, Trustee Pearl Chang, Trustee Bruce Swenson, Foothill De Anza Community College Chancellor Judy Miner, Karen Smith, Senior Library Technician and President of the Foothill Classified Senate, Breeze Liu, President of the Associated Students of Foothill College. ASFC President Liu will introduce our student speaker, Zachary Burke. Karen Holcroft, President of Foothill College Academic Senate and a member of the Foothill College Biology faculty, who will introduce our faculty speaker, Andrew Fracknoy. Graduates, before we continue to celebrate your success and your commencement, we want to honor and recognize those who have supported you on your journey and now celebrate your success. So please stand, turn around, and take a moment to acknowledge your family and friends and give them a heartfelt round of applause. Thank you. Please be seated. In 1960, Foothill College's first graduating class totaled 37 students. Tonight, I am delighted to tell you that the class of 2016 totals 1,014 students. This is one of the largest graduating classes and demonstrates the value of the associate degrees for transfer that many of our faculty staff have been working on to support our students as they begin to transfer or begin their rewarding careers. We are incredibly proud that Foothill students continue to transfer to the University of California, California State University, and many other elite universities across the country. Yay. We are equally proud of our students who are graduating and entering into the workforce. Those of you who are pursuing healthcare careers have greatly exceeded the average scores on state and national exams. I am delighted to announce that Foothill College Healthcare Career Program graduates consistently score remarkable pass rates on their national and state licensure examinations. Congratulations to our students and faculty for these amazing achievements. At this point, I would like to present ASFC President Breeze Liu, who will introduce tonight's student speaker.
Okay, so life is a journey, and education change our lives. Where we came from do not define who we are. Foothill inspired me to be a better person and a better leader. But we're not here to talk about myself, not today. From attending disciplinary camps in the North Carolina wilderness to floundering in high school, to graduating this evening with high honors and transferring to San Jose State University this fall, Zachary Burke's journey represents a triumph over self-low esteem, bullying, and not feeling accepted. Burke's attitude and optimism improved during his senior year, and he earned a high school diploma in 2014. With renewed confidence, he enrolled in summer classes at Foothill College so that he'd be better prepared for success when the fall quarter starts. He developed an intellectual curiosity, especially for sociology, and made academic discipline his college major. At Foothill, Burke began to strive academically and personally. The 20-year-old resident of Cupertino points to Foothill's overall supportive environment, as well as its outstanding instruction and compassionate, friendly faculty as his personal turning point. In addition to thanking his family and friends for their support, Burke expresses deep appreciation to the Foothill College faculty and staff who have always supported his academic journey and instilled in him a desire to encourage excellence. Life is a journey. Don't let anyone tell you don't let what you can't change interfere with what you cannot change. Focus on what you can control and believe in yourself. You will have a hell of a journey. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present you our student speaker, Zachary Burke.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to let you know I have to be somewhere by 9, so I'm going to keep it really, really short. I know we're wearing black as well. I don't know why they put us in black because it's super hot, but I'll try and make it quick. Thank you guys for coming anyway. So I want to talk to you guys about something that I hold to be very dear to me, a quote by which I try and live my life. And the quote is, "If not me, then who?" It can be applied to a wide variety of social situations, from doing the dishes to pulling somebody out of a burning car, right? If you don't do it, then who will? If not me, then who? Breeze said all that great stuff about me. Thank you, Breeze. My life hasn't been all that great. I wish it was. So I want to give you a little bit of background about me so you know that I'm not some cliche graduation speaker who has had everything handed to him, because we've all had to fight for what we have earned in life, and we're all here because we have fought. So anyway, I grew up, had a rough childhood. The only thing I can remember about the age of 10 is just my parents fighting, and fighting a lot. Sometimes those fights would get physical. Sometimes those fights, the physicality would turn towards me. Because of that and because of my own pre-existing conditions, I just became unable to function in normal everyday life. I was extremely depressed, angry, nervous. I really just couldn't function. I joke I was on so many different medications that you might as well have called me Walgreens Pharmacy. Thank you. Anyway, after being in therapy multiple times a week, things weren't working, right? Not even the medication. So I was sent to a disciplinary camp in North Carolina, and I had my 11th birthday there. I remember being there. I was there for 3 months, and during those 3 months, I had zero contact with anybody in my family besides the occasional letter, right? Kind of tough for a 10, 11-year-old. But I do always remember saying that my 11th birthday there was the best birthday I'd ever had, because I was around people who weren't fighting, which was nice. After that, though, things still weren't great at home, so I was sent to a disciplinary treatment center in Colorado, and I was there for 6th and 7th grade. I actually enjoyed my time there. Very, very structured environment, something that I needed in my life. And I was very excited to come home and to start anew and ready to put in the hard work. Unfortunately, I was sent to another boarding school, this time a normal boarding school, and that was the first time I dealt with bullying. Breeze kind of touched on that. I was bullied relentlessly until my junior year of high school. I came out, I had no self-confidence. All the work I had done was pretty much wiped away. It was very frustrating and a very difficult time in my life. However, luckily for me, I met some amazing people, some of whom are here today, so thank you, who really helped me through it and who really helped me become the person that I am today. They're just the best, and I'm very, very grateful. I want to talk back to the if not me, then who. That's pretty much the whole reason why I'm up here. So I told pretty much everyone in my family that I had no desire to walk in graduation at all, because, why. But anyway, I had a professor approach me in the early spring, and he asked me, hey, you know, are you planning to graduate after this quarter? And I said, yeah. He said, are you planning to walk? I felt comfortable giving him the sarcastic answer of, absolutely not. Just give me my piece of paper. But he looked kind of disappointed, so I asked him, you know, why? Why were you wondering? He said, you know, I sit on the graduation committee, and we're struggling to find a student speaker. So I figured I'd apply, again, if not me, then who? I didn't think I would get it, so it was kind of a shock to me that I'm even up here. Hopefully I do a good job. But anyway, it just was the reason why I'm even here. This motto is also apparent with all of us, right, that are here today. We all put in the necessary work to get here. You know, if you didn't show up for work because you had an exam the next day to study for, who would cover for you? We all put in the necessary work to be here. It's not about how we got here. It's about that we're here today and we're graduating today as a unit. I'm really, really happy to have gone to Foothill because it's, in my opinion, much better all around than most four-year schools, right? People tend to think that going to a four-year school, going straight away is the most prestigious option, but I really disagree. First of all, it's so much cheaper, and for those of us who have to pay for our own classes, right, four-year schools are just an unfeasible option. Many of us are working 40-plus hour work weeks a week. You know, you can't necessarily take classes at an impacted university, such as like San Jose State or Berkeley, because you just don't have the time for classes because you're working. Some of us are the first in our family to even go to college. To those people, I say, wow, because you guys know the value of education better than I ever will. So good job for you guys. Foothill is really what I've found, and hopefully you guys all agree with me, it's truly a community college, right? It has a really great sense of community. I remember I went to my San Jose State orientation a couple weeks ago, and I was shocked. I left it, and I was very disappointed. And I realized, you know, Foothill has really spoiled me. I mean, look at the campus, look at the people here, they're great. The professors here, in my experience, have been fantastic. Hopefully you guys have experienced the same thing. Not only have I found that they care about teaching us scholastic subjects, but they care about teaching us real world things, things that are gonna help us succeed in the real world. I wanna take a quick minute before I finish, I'm almost done, thank you, to talk about hard work, right? As you all know, I wasn't handed the best life. You know, I still have issues that I'm facing on a daily basis, like all of us. But I want to talk about how important I've found hard work to be. It seems that many, not necessarily of us, but many people in our generation, especially here in Silicon Valley, very affluent area, expect things to be handed to them. They are not willing to put in the work. I can't tell you how many friends and acquaintances I have. You know, I'm 20, almost 21. Some people who are older than me who still don't have their first job, right? They're living at home, they're playing video games all the time. You know, it's not productive. Us, on the other hand, we're a very diverse group of people. We have to work for what we want. We're going to be the type of people, thanks in part to what Foothill has instilled in us, who are going to be the best prepared for a job interview. We're going to be the people who are willing to stay late at work because we need a project to get done. Again, if not me, then who? You know, in regards to our futures, I would love to just end it there. Say, oh, we've all put in the hard work, right? We're going to be great. But first of all, I don't think I'm that naive, and I don't want to do a disservice to all of you by saying that things are going to be great, because they're not, right? We're going to have our own struggles and own issues that we're going to need to face, and we will need to face them. It's going to be up to us how we handle them, and trust me, I know firsthand that it's much easier oftentimes to just sweep an issue under the rug, just say, oh, I'll handle it later, or oh, someone else will take care of it. But in that time, I ask you to ask yourself that, you know, if you don't handle it, who will? If not me, then who? Thank you guys very much, and congratulations.
Thank you, and congratulations, Zachary. Known for his skill in interpreting astronomical discoveries and ideas in everyday language, Foothill College astronomy professor Andrew Fracknoy teaches the college's popular introductory astronomy classes. Educated at Harvard and the University of California, Berkeley, he joined the Foothill College faculty in 1992. Radio listeners know Fracknoy as a guest on local and national news and talk programs, and he's a regular on the Gil Gross program and KQED's Forum with Michael Krasny. Fracknoy has edited 2 collections of science articles and science fiction stories. He also wrote Disney's Wonderful World of Space, a book for kids. Asteroid 4859 has been named Asteroid Fracknoy by the International Astronomical Union to honor his work in sharing the excitement of modern astronomy with students, teachers, and the public.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I want to say that I'm really honored that the students chose the old astronomy professor as their faculty speaker. And I want to say to all those of you who are hot that you should be glad you're here on Earth and not on Venus, where the temperature is 900 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than the self-cleaning cycle of your oven. So compared to that, this is great. But seriously, on behalf of the faculty and staff here at Foothill College, it's a pleasure and privilege for me to congratulate all of you, the students who have reached this milestone, and the families and friends who have supported, encouraged, and occasionally yelled at them. Today is the day when we can say that whatever sacrifices you had to make, it was all worth it. This is the day to enjoy, to reflect, and a day to celebrate your achievements. A good number of you are immigrants or children of immigrants, and special congratulations go to you and your families. I was an immigrant myself, arriving in this country when I was 11 years old, not speaking a word of English. And the debt that I owe this country for giving me the amazing opportunities that I've had over the years can never really be fully repaid. But I've done my best to try to give back what I could, when I could, and I hope you will too. I can't help noting my hope that with clear-headed rules and precautions, the United States will continue to make citizenship opportunities available to many others who come here with the same hopes that we did. So today, I want to speak to you, as I do to all my students, as a scientist and an educator, and focus really on one question. I hope that your time at Foothill has given you new skills, better information about nature and history, a new enjoyment of the humanities and the arts. But I hope your years with us have been about more than just skills and information. I hope you've also learned to ask questions, because it is through clear-headed questioning that we really keep learning. And the one question I hope all of you will keep asking, the one question I especially encourage my students to ask in class, and the one question that is really the basis of scientific inquiry is, why should I believe a word of this? When I tell my students that most of the atoms in their bodies were constructed for them in the hot centers and final explosions of massive stars, they have every right to ask, why should I believe a word of this? Or how do you know that? Or what's the evidence? When I tell my students that thousands of planets are now known to surround the other stars we see in the night sky, and that a number of these planets are now known to resemble our own Earth in important ways, they have every right to ask, why should I believe a word of this? When I share with my students that ancient Mars, billions of years ago, was much more like the Earth, with a thick atmosphere, rivers, lakes, maybe even seas, and that it could have been a site for the first stirrings of life, my students have every right to ask, why should I believe a word of this? And in my classes, we try to give the evidence, the observations, the experiments that have led us to those conclusions, so that students can evaluate the steps that led us to these discoveries for themselves. I hope our students will continue to ask this crucial question even when the topics turn away from science. When a candidate for high office in this country makes general statements about people of one nationality or one religion, I hope you can ask them and yourself, why should I believe a word of this? When some snake oil salesman is trying to sell you or a loved one a medical cure that lies way outside the realm of serious medical knowledge, such as homeopathy, this bizarre notion that tiny bits of medicine diluted thousands of times are as good as the real thing, or when people talk about psychic surgery in the Philippines as curing cancer, I hope you will take a moment and ask your loved ones and yourself, why should I believe a word of this? When some spokesman for the coal industry is trying to convince you that global warming is not real and humanity's role in it is not established, I hope you can ask them and yourself, why should I believe a word of this? When a conspiracy monger tells you that vaccination causes autism, or that NASA faked the landings on the moon because we couldn't do it, or that our president was not born in the United States, I hope you can ask them and yourself, why should I believe a word of this? And after you've asked that question, be sure you examine the evidence carefully and thoroughly. Our students have grown up in the internet age, and there's no turning back to the world that an old geezer like me is already missing. Our students, on the other hand, now have the full world of information at their fingertips day and night. Unfortunately, that also means they have the full world of misinformation at their fingertips day and night. What I hope your college education has helped to teach you is to sift and examine that vast store of information carefully, to find out what experiments and statistically valid studies have shown and not shown, and to consider who stands to benefit when you hear outrageous claims. In other words, I hope you will live your life looking at facts. Facts can shine their light into the dark places of our culture and illuminate them. It's no coincidence that one of the key things the gun lobby got the congressional representatives that they have supported with money and votes to do for them was to forbid the Centers for Disease Control and the National Institutes of Health to gather facts about the epidemic of gun violence that's washing over our country. Facts have a way of focusing our attention on the real world and not on our fantasies, prejudices, or delusions. So graduates, what I want to wish you is a fact-based life, a clear-headed, questioning life as you make your way beyond Foothill. Let me finish with this personal thought. Many of you who have taken classes or heard my public lectures from me know that one of my special passions in astronomy is SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence in space. In fact, I have the privilege of serving on the board of the SETI Institute right here in Mountain View. Right now, we are in the process of listening for signals or messages that might be coming our way, probably by accident, from technological civilizations among the stars. This is a passive activity, like listening to the radio in your car. You can hear what the people on the radio are saying, but they don't know that you in particular are listening at that moment. But today, perhaps for the first time, we also have the capability of sending our own messages to the stars. We can start announcing louder and clearer than has ever been possible before that we exist here on Earth. Some people in our field are eager for us to announce ourselves, while others are very worried about our doing this. After all, as a species that has just developed long-distance communications in the last century, we must be, through no fault of our own, among the youngest and most inexperienced intelligent life forms in the universe. What will happen if we overhear a message from an alien civilization out there? One thing I hope might happen is that learning about real aliens, the differences among us here on Earth will suddenly seem much smaller and less important. But unless we learn to resolve these earthly differences, I suspect we may not yet be worthy of joining into any kind of extraterrestrial conversation. After all, who wants to be friends with a family that's always fighting amongst themselves? So as you leave Foothill, I hope you will have fulfillment in your personal life, in your community life, and in your work life. But even more, I hope that you will contribute every day to making a planet that is a little bit more just, a little bit more fair, and a little bit more kind than the one my generation is leaving to you. I really hope that by the time your children or their children graduate from college, as you're doing today, we will then be just a little bit closer to being able to claim that there is intelligent life on Earth. Thank you very much.
I want to congratulate our speakers. Thanks again for such wonderful speeches, both our student speakers, Zachary Burke and Professor Fracknoy. You know, as the interim president of Foothill College, there is no greater honor or pleasure for me than to welcome you here to celebrate your success and to confer your degrees. One of the things I think about when I'm planning to speak to the students is, especially at commencement, is I always think about what incredible stars you are. And Professor Fracknoy just gave me the most wonderful way to know that. And he says, why should you believe that? Well, not only look around, look at all the people who care so much about you, who are here to celebrate your success. And then, as Professor Fracknoy said, remember that you are all made of stars. So I know that your future is going to be incredibly bright. When you first arrived here at Foothill, you were probably very nervous and full of doubts, but you have persevered, worked hard, and succeeded. And there is no doubt that you will continue your success and make a great difference in this world after you leave Foothill. As you move on to future endeavors, I hope you, like Zachary, continue to remember that this Foothill College is your family, and we will always welcome you back, whether you come back to visit, keep in touch, let us know what you're doing, or perhaps you'll come back and volunteer, or maybe even come back and join us here and be a member again of the Foothill College family and be a professor or a staff member or an administrator. So we will never let you go. It is truly my pleasure to welcome the class of 2016 into our lifetime community of Foothill. You are exceptional people, and I am proud to call you graduates. Congratulations. It is now my pleasure to announce the recipients of the Foothill College's Presidential Medal, the highest scholastic honor bestowed annually by this college. It is recognition at this occasion of the students who have most clearly demonstrated academic achievement in all college work applicable to a degree at Foothill College. Tonight, I am pleased to announce that there is one recipient of the President's Medal. When I call your name, please come forward to the stage. This year's President Medalist is Shuk Ying Lam, Associate in Arts degree for Transfer Economics. Oh, there she is. Where do I go? Do I go? She's coming. So I go over here? Please join me in honoring Shuk Ying once again. I would now like to invite Dr. Carolyn Hallcroft, President of the Academic Senate, to officially certify the class of 2016.
Graduates, please stand. On behalf of the faculty of the college, I certify that the candidates before you and those in the official commencement program to this date have to this date satisfactorily completed the requirements for the Foothill College Associate in Arts degree, Associate in Arts degree for transfer, Associate in Science degree, or Associate in Science degree for transfer.
For Foothill College, and by the authority vested in me by the State of California and the Board of Governors, and on behalf of the Foothill De Anza District's Board of Trustees, I hereby confer the degrees of Associate in Arts, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Associate in Science, Associate in Science for Transfer, for the graduates. Board President Barham, members of the board, families, and guests, it is with great pleasure that I present to you Foothill College's class of 2016. Thank you, graduates. Please be seated and remain seated until you're welcome to the stage. We will now begin awarding the diplomas.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Teresa Ong, and I am pleased to present to you our graduates from the Business and Social Sciences Division. First up, Breeze Liu, Associate in Science, General Studies, ASFC Lifetime Member. Zachary Burke, Associate in Arts and Sociology. You're welcome. Diana Jin, Associates in Science and Associates in Science for Transfer Business Administration. Rebecca Ackerstrand, Associate in Arts and Business Administration, ASFC Lifetime Member, and she is the first in her family to graduate with a college degree. Catalina Cordova, Associate in Arts and Social Science and Sociology, and she is also the first in her family to graduate. Heather Kornblum, Associate in Arts, transferring to UC Berkeley, majoring in psychology, Dean's List, honors research scholar. Anam Etasham, Associate in Science for Transfer and Business Administration. Teresa Ma Kataya, Associate in Arts, Accounting with highest honors, Dean's List. Glenn Onan, Associate in Science for Transfer in Psychology and Sociology, Dean's List, and a veteran. Cheryl Stolman, Associate in Sciences, General Studies, Science. Yeah, all right. Lee Villegas, Associate in Science, General Studies, Science. Saul Torres, Associate in Arts and Psychology and Sociology, Dean's List, and the first in his family. Kapika Asiza, Associate in Arts for Transfer Psychology. Igor Pesarenko, Associate in Arts for Social Science and is a scholar athlete. Christine Tabbitt, Associate in Arts for Transfer and Business Administration Economics, a scholar athlete and first in her family. Magali Yoshida, Associate in Arts in Child Development, and she is the first in her family. Estefania Maldonado, Associate in Arts for Transfer Psychology. Yesenia Medina, Associate in Arts in Business Administration, and she is the first in her family. Kristen Hill Peterson, Associate in Arts for Transfer Psychology. Stephanie Garcia, Associate in Arts, General Education, Social Science. Aranza Estudillo, Child Development Associate in Arts, and she is also an honor scholar. Caitlin Galvin, Associate in Arts for Transfer in Child Development, transferring to San Francisco State University, also an Associate in Science for Transfer. Jesus Abraham Garcia, Associate in Science and Social Science, transferring to Cal State East Bay. He is the first in his family. Jens Wang, Associate in Science for Transfer to UC Riverside Business Administration, and he is also the first in his family. Itai Intrater, Associate in Science for Transfer, Political Science Honor Scholar. Maria Hernandez Noriega, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Psychology, and she is the first in her family. Sivar Polat, Associate in Science for Transfer, Business Administration, and he is also the first in his family. Wang Yifei, Associate in Arts and Economics. Xiong Bailei, Associate in Arts and Accounting. Jessica Alvarado, Associate in Arts in Sociology, the first in her family to graduate and transferring to Cal State Monterey Bay. Adriana Sandoval, Associate in Arts in Social Science and Sociology, first in her family and transferring to San Francisco State. Lin Tu, Associate in Science and Social Science, and he is the first in his family to graduate with a college degree. Amber Kang, Associate in Science for Transfer in Psychology, Dean's List, Honor Scholar. Edna Enriquez, Associate in Science, Business Administration, Dean's List, and the first in her family. Jessica Munoz, Associate in Science, Psychology, and she is also the first in her family. Arathi Palasimi, Associate in Arts for Transfer in History. David Flores, Associate in Arts and General Studies. He's also a Dean's List recipient, and he's the first in his family to graduate from college. Ashley Velasquez, Associate in Science for Transfer in Psychology, transferring to Palo Alto University, and the first in her family to graduate from college. Perla Ramos, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Political Science, Dean's List, and the first in her family to graduate. Zoe Kleitman, Associate in Arts for Transfer in General Studies, Social Sciences, Psychology, Yeah, that's a lot. Anna Bertha Melgoza, Associate in Arts Psychology and a first in her family. Tam Go, Associate in Science for transfer to San Jose State in Business Administration, Dean's List, and also the first in her family. Ruth Panapatala Moa, Associate in Arts Psychology, first in her family. Elizabeth Rojas, Associate in Arts Social Sciences, first in her family. Cindy Michelle Lopez Ruiz, Associate in Arts for Transfer Psychology, first in her family. Karen Zumidio, Associate in Arts for Transfer Political Science, also the first in her family. Ariel Kalamba, Associate in Arts Business Administration. Saha Hashemian, Associate in Arts for transfer to UC Berkeley, Psychology, Dean's List. Chunyip Timothy Ng, Associate for Arts and Transfer, Economics, Dean's List, Honor Scholar, transferring to UCLA. Wow. Woo. Catherine Liu, Associate in Science for transfer to Columbia University in Business. She's a Dean's List member. Stephanie Litagaga, Associate in Arts, General Studies. Oscar Uriel Escobedo, Associate in Science, Associate in Arts for transfer to UC Davis in Economics, and the first in his family. Diego Osorio, Associate in Arts, General Science, Social Studies, and the first in his family to graduate from college. Wesley Andrew, Associate in Arts for Transfer Political Science to San Francisco State University. Heather Collins, Associate in Arts for Transfer Anthropology. Cassandra Cabanero, transferring to CSU East Bay with an Associate of Arts in Transfer in Sociology and the first in her family. Emily Alexson Brown, Associate in Arts Accounting, Dean's List. Loreno Patillo, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Psychology and Anthropology, Dean's List, and first in her family. Deanna Hooker, Associate in Arts for Transfer, General Studies, Social Science. She's a scholar athlete. Thomas Kofi, Associate in Arts for Transfer, General Studies, Social Science, scholar athlete. David Maldonado, transferring to UC Santa Cruz, Associate in Arts and Psychology, Dean's List, honors. Jarrett Silva, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Psychology, transferring to University of Nevada, Reno, first in his family. Chris Brody, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Associate in Science for Transfer in Economics, Business Administration, transferring to Santa Clara University. Omar Ortega Zapata, Associate in Science for Transfer, Business Administration, first in his family and going to Cal State East Bay. Valentina Velli, Associate in Arts, International Business Studies, first in her family. Rafael Luna, Associate in Arts Psychology. Sim Pham, Associate of Science for Transfer in Business and Dean's List and first in her family. Yesenia Pasayo, Associate in Arts and Psychology, transferring to Menlo College, first in her family. Kai Hirota, transferring to Santa Clara University, Associate in Science for Transfer, Business Administration, Economics, Dean's List, Honor Scholar, first in his family. Isabel Jimenez, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Psychology, first in her family. Evelyn Campos, Associate in Arts and Sociology, first in her family. Arnulfo Prado, Associate in Arts, Social Sciences, first in his family. Jessica Holmes, Associate in Science for Transfer, Child Development. Ina Suarez, Associate in Science for Transfer, Early Childhood Education, first in her family. Han Wang, Associate in Science for Transfer, Child Development, first in her family. Ruth Anaya, Associate in Arts, Child Development. Lily Ang Burton, Associate in Arts, Child Development, Dean's List, and first in her family. Noella Valente, Associate in Arts, Child Development, Dean's List. Cheryl Karishma Sharan, Associate in Arts, Child Development, and first in her family. Andrea Oliveras, Associate in Arts, Child Development, Dean's List. Kayla Critchfield, Associate in Science for Transfer, Business Administration. Fat Steve Tran, Associate in Science for Transfer, Economics, Social Science, transferring to San Jose State, and first in his family. Elisa Buckner, Associate in Arts for Transfer and Sociology. Eric Phelan, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Economics. Shelby Duncan, Associate in Science for Transfer, Business Administration. Jose Martinez, Associate in Science for Transfer, Business Administration, first in his family. Amy Aurora Renata, Associate in Science for Child Development, Dean's List, first in her family. Capri McGee, Associate in Arts, Child Development. Congratulations. David Dawson, Associate in Arts for Transfer and History, Dean's List. Chief Anthony Abuyan, Associate in Science, General Studies of Science, Dean's List, U.S. veteran, first in his family. James Rosen, Associate in Arts for Transfer, History for Transfer, I forget, United States veteran. Daniel Muse, Associate in Arts and Philosophy, History, Dean's List, Honor Scholar, U.S. veteran, first in his family. Christopher Wong, Associate in Arts, Social Science. Estefania Mapome, Associate in Science for Transfer, Business Administration, first in her family. Andrea Velasquez, transferring to UC Davis, Associate in Science for Transfer, Business Administration, first in her family. Yvonne Ng, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Business Administration, Dean's List, ASFC lifetime member. Yahiru Ulibas, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Psychology, first in her family. Edgar Ivan Cruz, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Psychology, going to San Jose State University. Declan Rivera, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Psychology, and Social Sciences, first in his family. Noel Gross, Associate in Science, Psychology, Dean's List. Gelfenbaum. Alexa Gelfenbaum, Associate in Arts, Child Development. Catherine Bravo, Associate in Arts, Child Development, first in her family. Mark Butler Creamer Jr., Associate in Science for Transfer, Business Administration, Scholar Athlete. He's going to Ohio Dominican University. Amanda Gonzalez, Associate in Arts, General Studies, Social Sciences, first in her family to graduate from college. Allegra Paz, Associate in Arts, General Studies. Gaudencio Balbuena Solis, Associate in Arts, General Studies, first in his family. Sheila Smith, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Sociology. Ryan Johnson, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Sociology. Leslie Marie Tionco, Associate in Arts, General Studies, Social Science, Scholar, Athlete. Selena Havate, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Psychology, first in her family. Shelby Mancini, Associate in Arts for Transfer to UC Davis, Psychology. Shuk Ying Lam, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Economics, Dean's List, Honor Scholar. Delilah Sandoval, Associate in Arts and Associate in Arts for Transfer, Sociology, Psychology, General Studies, Social Science, going to UCSD, Dean's List, first in her family. Okay. Miliadair Severin, Associate in Arts for Transfer, General Studies, Social Sciences. Stephanie Solorzano, transferring to UC Davis, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Sociology, Psychology, first in her family. Jose Gallaso, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Business Administration, first in his family. He's going to San Jose State University. Monique Graves, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Associate in Science for Transfer, General Studies, Psychology, going to San Jose State. Okay. Norimasa Hosoda, Associate in Arts, Sociology, Dean's List, Honor Scholar. Mushkan Katie Forotan, Associate in Science for Transfer, Psychology, Sociology, first in her family. Marjan Forotan, Associate in Sciences, Associate in Science for Transfer in Sociology, Psychology, and Social Sciences.
My name is Nanette Salveson, and I'm the Dean of Biological and Health Sciences. The Allied Health Programs and the Department of Biology are in our division. The first students from our division to receive degrees are from the Department of Biology. Jacqueline Mendoza, Associates in Science, transferring to UC Santa Cruz, and she's the first from her family to graduate from college. Emily Gibbons, transferring to UC Santa Cruz, Associates in Science. Kimberly Joy Kakatian, Associates in Science, and first from her family to graduate from college. Introducing the dental assisting students is the program director, Kara Miyasaki.
Melissa Wall, Associates in Science degree in Dental Assisting, first in her family to graduate from college. Johanna Robles, Associate of Science in Dental Assisting, first in her family to graduate from college. Deep Fan, Associate in Science in Dental Assisting, and first in her family to attend college. Roslyn Jarelli, Associate in Science degree in Dental Assisting. Yeah. Beverly Bansel, Associate of Science in Dental Assisting, Dean's List. Tiffany Wang, Associate in Science in Dental Assisting. Sophie Phone, Associates in Science in Dental Assisting, and first in her family to graduate from college. Veronica Anita Pataki, Associate of Science in Dental Assisting.
The next program, students to receive degrees, is dental hygiene. Students from the dental hygiene program participated in 2 humanitarian missions this year. One was with the Global Brigades traveling to Honduras and provided health care to rural villages there. The second was a trip to Vietnam where the students provided oral hygiene care for orphans. And the students are recognized with their blue and red sashes who participated in these missions. Announcing the students is Phyllis Sprague, the program director for dental hygiene.
And I also want to add, this is our 50th graduating class. So it's Ivan Ferrer, AS degree in dental hygiene, did Vietnam and Honduras, and he's a U.S. veteran. High honors. Katie Marie Eklund, Associate of Science in Dental Hygiene, Dean's List, and Vietnam. Haley Marie Humphrey, Dental Hygiene, Vietnam, Dean's List. Alexandra Jean Zerpolo, AS degree in Dental Hygiene, Vietnam, Honduras, Dean's List. Elizabeth Lauren Reed, AS degree in Dental Hygiene, Vietnam, Dean's List. Nicole Antonis, Dental Hygiene, Vietnam trip, Dean's List. Julie Ran, Dental Hygiene, AS degree, did Vietnam, Honduras, and Dean's List. Diana No, AS degree Dental Hygiene, Vietnam mission trip, the coordinator of it, and Dean's List. Stella Han, AS degree Dental Hygiene, Honduras and Vietnam, Dean's List. V. Tran, Dental Hygiene, AS degree, Vietnam, and she is the first in her family to graduate from college. Van Van Chu, Vietnam trip, AS degree in Dental Hygiene, Dean's List. Anne-Marie Turling, AS degree Dental Hygiene, Dean's List. Amy Fiffield, AS degree in Dental Hygiene. Robin Teeters, AS degree Dental Hygiene, Dean's List, Honors Scholar. Navjeet Chopin, AS degree Dental Hygiene, Honors Scholar. Rosanna Young, AS degree Dental Hygiene, Vietnam trip, Dean's List, and starting a master's degree at San Francisco State next week. Stephanie Chin, AS degree Dental Hygiene, Dean's List, Vietnam trip, also starting a master's degree at San Francisco next week.
Thank you, Phyllis. Introducing the environmental horticulture graduates is Program Director Dave Sauter.
Thank you. We have 4 of our graduates. The rest are at your house retrofitting your irrigation. First is Kathy Rodeheffer, associate's degree in science, Dean's List. Next is Mark de Guzman, associate's degree, Dean's List. Next we have Shannon Hollywood, associate degree in science, second in her family to graduate. Equity. And Andrew Bierman, associate's degree in science, Dean's List, first in his family to graduate, only child.
Introducing the Farm Tech students is the Program Director Angela Sue.
Good evening. Reina Castro-Meza, Associate Science degree in Pharmacy Technology and first in her family to graduate from college. Congratulations. David Daniel Gareca III, AS degree in Pharmacy Technology and first in his family to graduate from college. Yvonne Renee Gareca, Associates in Science, Pharmacy Technology, also Dean's List. Tamara Matazol, Associates in Sciences, Pharmacy Technology. Kayana Kalistov, Associates in Sciences, Pharmacy Technology. Trang Nguyen, Associates in Sciences, Pharmacy Technology, Dean's List, and first in her family to graduate from college.
Introducing the Radiologic Technology graduates is the program director, Rochelle Campbell.
Katrina Rodriguez, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List. Thanks. Pam Schmidt, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List. Karen Tomiko Fuji, Associate of Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List. Tricia Lynn Fisher, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology. Hannah Graves, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology. Kelsey Kenna, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology. Amanda Marie Byron, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List. Olivia Vinaha Fields, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List. Megan Hobbs, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List. Raimundo Angelo Padilla, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List. He made me do it. Tracy Wentworth, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List.
Tracy! Honey Badger!
Carrie Ellingworth, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List.
Carrie, I'm embarrassed of you too!
Yelena Volkova, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List. Natalie Maloon, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology. Juan the Man Garay, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology, Dean's List. Jerry Said, Associate in Science, Radiologic Technology.
Introducing the respiratory therapy students is the program director, Brenda Hanning. Three of the respiratory therapy students also attended the mission, the humanitarian mission in Honduras, and their participation is recognized by the Blue Sash.
Derek Mendoza, Associate of Science, Respiratory Therapy, and also he has been accepted into the residency program at Lucille Packard for respiratory therapists. Oh, Dean's List. Thank you. and Dean's List. Winta Durso, Associate of Science degree in Respiratory Therapy. Samra Gebremariam, Associate of Science degree in Respiratory Therapy, Dean's List. Juliette Barnia, Associate of Science degree in Respiratory Therapy. Good job. Thank you. Emily Free, Associate of Science degree in Respiratory Therapy. Javier Trell, Associate of Science degree in Respiratory Therapy, Global Brigades Honduras, and a veteran.
Where are you? Oh. I am thrilled to introduce James Borina, who's just a little bit out of order, but we're just as proud. Associates in Art for Transfer, transferring to San Diego State for a degree in psychology, and first in his family to graduate from college. Congratulations. Hey. Oh my gosh, hi, okay. Michael Britton, Associates in Science, paramedic, first in his family to graduate from college. Introducing our Vet Tech students is the program director, Lisa Eschman.
Joseph Arnold, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology, Honors Scholar. Look at this too. Nicole Uyghur, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technologist, Dean's List. Oops, sorry about that. Tessa Bochin, Associate Science degree, Veterinary Technology, Dean's List. Jeanette Chang, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology, Dean's List. Millicent Liu, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology. Bianca Galfo, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology. Crystal Lamb, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology. Kyoko Ogawa, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology. Congratulations. Selena Elisa Garcia, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology, Dean's List. Caitlin Bell, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology. Elizabeth Ann Obermeyer, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology, Dean's List. Maria Portillo, Associates in Science degree, Veterinary Technology. Dana Christensen, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology, and she's the first in her family to graduate from college. Raylene Uribe, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology, Dean's List, and the first in her family to graduate from college. Mia Konanen, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology. Alyssa Stashak, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology. Angelica Ramos, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology. Carly Stivers, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology, Honors Scholar. Lyndon Harris, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology, Dean's List. Jillian Alley, Associate in Science, Veterinary Technology. Kendall Judson, Associate in Science, Veterinary Technology, Dean's List. Susan Novick, Associate in Science degree, Veterinary Technology, Dean's List. Mallory Brill, President of the Student Chapter of the National Association of Veterinary Technicians, Associate in Science and Veterinary Technology, Dean's List.
Good evening. My name is Simon Pennington, and it is my honor to introduce the graduates from the Fine Arts and Communication and Kinesiology and Athletics divisions. Ren Geiselhardt, Associate in Arts, Dean's List. Marcia Bukowski de Farias, Associate in Arts with Honors, Dean's List. Congratulations. Masako Wakatsuki, Associate in Arts, Communication Studies, Dean's List. Diana Areola, Associate in Arts, Photography. Sura Tewelda, Associate in Arts, Communications, Dean's List. She's going to UCLA. Jennifer Imhoff Dorsham, Associate in Arts, Communication, Dean's List. And she is the first person from her family to graduate from college. Thank you. That's perfect. Lovely. Like a piano. Thank you. Jessica Felix, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Communication Studies. First person to graduate from college, and she's going to San Jose State. Dania Modad, Associates in Arts, Communication Studies, Dean's List. Reina Modad, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Communications and Psychology, Dean's List. Kenzo Suda, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Communication, Dean's List. Anuja Fansalkar, Associate in Arts, Graphic and Interactive Design, Dean's List. Alec Silva Fagarang. Quite the fan club. Associate in Arts for Transfer, Communications and English, Dean's List, Honours Scholar, first person in his family to graduate from college, and he's off to Berkeley. Congratulations. Rebecca Segerian, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Communication Studies, Dean's List, Santa Clara University. Andrea Clark, Associates in Arts, Theatre Technology, with highest honors, Dean's List. And she is the first person to graduate from college in her family. Veronica Haas, Associates in Arts, Graphic and Interactive Design. Randall Fields, Associates in Arts for Transfer, General Music, Dean's List. Miles Henderson, Associates in Arts for Transfer, in Music, UC Riverside. Alexander Zegarnik, Associates in Arts, Music Technology. Congratulations. Bryce Hall, Associates in Arts, Music Technology. William Gregg, Associates in Arts, Music and Music Technology, Dean's List with high honors. Eleanor Grace Harnett, Associates in Arts, Theater Technology, off to San Francisco State. Karina Gonzalez, Associates in Arts, Communication, transferring to Cal State Sacramento. She is the first in her family, to graduate from college. Akisha Wheely. I'll let you milk it for a while, yeah. Associates in Arts for Transfer, Communication, Health Science, Dean's List. Robbie Tusini, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Communications, Hospitality and Hotel Management, transferring to San Jose State. Congratulations. Tiffany Fan, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Communication, transferring to UC Berkeley, Dean's List. Victoria Swenson, 2 Associates in Arts degrees in Psychology, Communication Studies, Dean's List, transferring to San Jose State. Hannah Chandler, Associates in Arts for Art, graduating with highest honors, Dean's List. Beatriz Manciabanos, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Communication Studies, first in the family to graduate from college, transferring to CSU East Bay. Look, graduates are getting younger every year. Look at this. So what's she graduating? Anjali Dalisi Lutz, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Communication Studies, Dean's List, mother of a 2-year-old son, Zayden, transferring to San Jose State. Laura Shalane Bergman, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Communications, Dean's List, ASFC Lifetime Member. Estela Guerra, Associates in Arts, Communication Studies, first in the family to graduate from college. William Fonda, Associates in Arts, Associate in Arts for Transfer, Communication Studies. Alberto Diaz Jr. Thank you. Associates in Arts, Communication Studies, transferring to UC Santa Cruz. Charles Villar, Associates in Arts, Communications, US Navy vet, and owner of Bruno. Diana Maria Van Look, Associates in Arts, Graphic and Interactive Design, Dean's List, first in her family to graduate from college. Charles Irons, Associates in Arts in Graphic and Interactive Design, Dean's List. Heidi Guil, Associates in Arts, Graphic and Interactive Design, Dean's List, first in her family to graduate from college. Jacqueline Hernandez Flores, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Communications, first in her family to graduate from college. Alvin Villela Delgado, Associates in Arts for Transfer in Kinesiology, transferring to CSU East Bay. Karen Serrano Vides. Got a fan club there. Associates in Arts, Associates in Arts for Transfer, General Studies, Social Science, Kinesiology.
Good evening. I'm very pleased to present the graduates in the Language Arts Division. Nick Jilka, Associate in Arts, Spanish, Que bueno. Hideki Kumai Kogai? Hideki Kumaikai. Associate in Arts degree, Spanish, honor scholar, first in his family to graduate. Paula Leticia Perez, Associate in Arts degree, Spanish, first in her family to graduate. Giselle Hernandez, Associate in Arts degree, Spanish, first in her family to graduate college. Megan Palou, Associate in Arts degree, English. Veronica Zapparelli, Associate in Arts degree, English. Jessica Sendeno, Associate in Arts degree, Japanese. Takayuki Yokoto, Associate in Arts degree, graduating, going to Berkeley, Japanese. Effin Sham Parado, Jr., Associate in Arts degree for transfer, English. Brian Newman, Associate in Art for Transfer, English, Sociology, Communication, transferring to San Francisco State, Dean's List. Salingi Nemo Lesu, even close? Okay. Selangi Nemo Lesui, Associate in Arts degree, English, first in her family to graduate college.
My name is Victor Tam, and on behalf of the 180 faculty members and staff of the Physical Sciences, Mathematics, and Engineering Division, I am proud to present to you our division's graduates of the class of 2016. Starting off, Mariam Hadi Khan, Associates in Science, General Studies Science. She's transferring to West Coast University, Southern California. Daniela Lopez, Associates in Science, Engineering, transferring to San Jose State University, proud mom of a two-week-old baby. Edward Cook, Associates in Science, General Studies Science, Scholar Athlete, D-line on the football team. Marika Vadstrubner, Associates in Science, Chemistry, transferring to UC Santa Cruz in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, Scholar Athlete, Swimming. Peter Kromov, Associates in Science, Triple Major, Computer Science, Mathematics, and Awesomeness. Robert Comstock, Associates in Science, Engineering, Associates in Science for Transfer, Physics, transferring to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in Aerospace Engineering, Dean's List. Derek McBride, Associates in Science, Mathematics, transferring to UC Davis for Computer Science. Would like to thank his family for their support. First generation college graduate. John Lazzarini Jr., Associate in Science, Computer Science, transferring to San Francisco State University. Would like to thank supportive family and instructors, ASFC lifetime member. Jiowen Zhu, or Evan, Associates in Science, Computer Science, transferring to San Francisco State University. David Mapapa Ngui, Associates in Science, Mechanical Engineering, Associates in Science, Physics, transferring to San Jose State University, Dean's List. Joanna Curiel, Associates in Science for Transfer, General Studies Science, transferring to San Jose State University for Health Sciences. First generation college graduate because she wants to be an example to her sister Gigi. Matthew Barnhart, Associates in Science, General Studies Science with high honors. Hell yeah. Dean's List. He's also good looking and humble. Alexandra Garcia, Associates in Science, General Studies Science, first generation college graduate. Christina Garcia, double major, Associates in Science, General Studies Science, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Psychology, first generation college graduate. Elena Aravina, Associates in Science, Computer Science, Dean's List, first generation college graduate, now a software developer at Joint Bioenergy Institute. Kellen Hanadel, Associates in Science for Transfer, Mathematics, transferring to Sacramento State University. Would like to thank his family for all their support. Michelle Abels, Associates in Science, General Studies Science, Dean's List. Thank you, and shout out to Bruce, Mom, Dad, and Megan. Veronica Vasquez, Associates in Science, General Studies Science, first generation college graduate. We'd like to say hi to Ivan and Ava. Yuko Takada, double major, Associates in Arts, General Studies, Social Science, Associates in Science, General Studies, Science, first generation college graduate. Veronica Satisable, Associates in Science, General Studies Science, Dean's List. And our last graduate, Yu Fei Cheng, double major, Associates in Science, General Studies Science, Associates in Arts for Transfer, Psychology, first generation college graduate.
We are almost there. We ask the audience to remain seated until the graduates, faculty, and platform party have moved to the reception area. At that time, please join us for a complimentary reception and meet your graduate at the Campus Center Plaza, which is located to your left and down the stairs. Families and friends, have your cameras ready. Graduates, please stand. Graduates, you may now complete the commencement tradition by moving your tassel from right to left. Woo! To honor our graduates, Foothill faculty and staff will now form the Corridor of Honor. This ceremonial formation applauds the accomplishments of our graduates as well as the futures they are about to explore. Please remain seated and meet your graduate at the reception. We would like to thank Altos Brass for this evening's live music, including the recessional. Thank you. Thank you.